Actually, can I ask you a quick question? Before we start this show, I have a really interesting question I wanted to ask you ahead of time. And that was, have you already voted for this yet?
No, I haven't voted yet.
Oh, me neither. Does that make us bad for doing this before we actually vote?
No.
Is this making us just wiser and more educated in our choices?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of films to watch. So if you're like haven't seen them all or you want to refresh them, like I wouldn't have wanted to watch them all when they came out and then just try to remember them when I voted.
Yeah. Yeah, yesterday we ended up watching 3 movies in a row, which was fun because it's going to be really fresh in our minds. But in doing so, I feel like I've maybe lost a little bit of touch. I'm looking forward to talking with you about these because I know you took like really good notes. I did not necessarily do that. So yeah. So if you haven't caught on yet, this is the Chainsaw Awards we're talking about. 2022 Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. We are Rabotat Records, Madame Defer, Ironfist. We are talking about our picks for 2022.
As far as format goes, what are we doing different this year? Because I felt like we went really hard last year. We did watch basically every single movie last year. This one we haven't seen a couple, like right off the bat, disclaimer, we didn't watch like A Quiet Place 2 and a couple other ones, but we stayed pretty up to date through the year and so catching up really wasn't as difficult. So we really just picked the ones that we really wanted to see and the ones that we thought would be really good.
Yeah, I mean, and to also mention just the fact that throughout the year we sprinkle in all sorts of different horror movies and watching all sorts of different stuff. So even though this was a really, really extensive list of really good movies that did come out this year, there was also so much that got left out that, you know, I think for the sake of what they picked, it's a beautiful. Like you said, some really great stuff in here.
But we're not going to walk through the entire category of the Chainsaw Awards. Like we didn't do that last year either. No. We did take some out. We kind of took some liberties. But we're really only going to do 4 categories, which is Best Wide Release, Best Limited Release, which is like a smaller scale film, and Best First Feature, and of course Best Score, since we're a record label.
We're the music peeps.
And even with that, we're going to take some liberties with that score because there was one film on there that Madame Defer and I really liked that didn't get nominated or put in that category, which is crazy.
Yeah, true. And we're also going to do our best kill because that's always a fun one, and who doesn't want to focus on some good kills?
Yeah, definitely. And that one is always really fun in the Fangoria forums because it's a pick your own. So they just want you to tell them what you thought was the best. There isn't like a preset category. And I think that's cool because it's a subjective category, which in award shows, you don't really get a subjective category. Even when you do like a fan vote, there still are selects locked in place. So they're just trying to see what people thought were the best and who's actually going to engage with that and fill that out. And those are people who make their voice heard. So more than ever, make sure you vote and make your voice heard.
Make your voice heard this year for Fangoria 2022. Yeah, should we just crack in? Also, after this, we are going to go through a couple of our recommendations from this list of nominees that we might not necessarily talk about those other departments. Like, I think there's some good recommendations in here, including like Best Creature FX. We got Achievement in Nonfiction, which I know we'll definitely talk about because there's a few things on there that we always end up watching kind of religiously, and that's super cool. Like you talked about Best Foreign Language Film. So we're going to go through our list after of things we recommend dually, and then we'll also go into some separate recommendations. And so that's our format for this show, this go around.
Yeah, definitely.
A little more loosey-goosey, but I think it'll be fun.
Let's get into it.
Start?
Yeah, let's get into it. Oh. So category 1, we have the wide release, quote unquote, mainstream horror, which are the things that most people have seen, unless you're like really like a horror fan or you just have streaming services and are just kind of curious.
True.
So out of these 5 picks that we have, what would you consider to be your top pick?
I get to go first?
Yes, we should. Yeah, you go, of course. Ladies first, especially given the theme of all these films.
How kind.
But I also wanted to say we're going to give our recommendation, our vote, and also our runner-up.
Yeah, we got 2 each.
Just to give you lots of things to view. Hopefully you watch these films.
Yeah, I would highly recommend even the ones that we might not necessarily recommend from our angle of things. art is relevant to who you are.
If we really didn't like it, if I didn't really like it, maybe you will, and you could tell me that I'm wrong, and I would love to hear why you liked it.
Yeah.
So please, just if you end up watching any of these films or you have seen any of these films, let us know what you think. We'll have a list of the films for you to check out.
Yeah. So check the description on the podcast or wherever you're watching, and we'll give you our list. So
best wide release out of these 5.
Yeah.
What was your first vote?
Okay. So my first one might not be everybody's pick, but I ended up going with *Malignant* as my first movie.
Okay.
I'm having visions.
Context is everything, and I ended up seeing this with my dad when I was visiting with my parents in Maine early this year, and something about this film, I mean, accessibility is one thing, so we were able to stream it on HBO super easy. They promoted the crap out of it. I don't know if you remember that, but there was so many trailers, and so I was like, I have to see this ridiculous James Wan movie, and that ended up being why I have it as my number 1. It's a clean, very it's made for audiences, like a fairly wide audience. I think that it's made to be consumed by people who watch Saw or made to watch Conjuring and those films that are kind of in the same vein. But the difference is that the story is so just bonkers. Like, if you really think through a lot of the storyline, which is about this girl who's kind of dealing with this dark force in her life that's following her and killing people around her. She doesn't know where it's coming from, but it stems back to her childhood. It's so campy and fun, and I'm gonna harken back to all this when I talk about my best kill, but it was a blast to watch. It didn't make a lot of sense at times, and some of the sets were like, for what they were trying to accomplish with like how condensed these places were, they were so big, outlandish, they allowed for a lot of like really fun things. So ultimately for me, *Malignant* ended up being my number 1.
For your runner-up, what's your runner-up then?
For my runner-up, ended up being *CANDYMAN*.
This is where it all began. The story of Candyman. Lone character, he walk around handing out candy to the neighborhood kids. One day, a couple of kids get razor blades in their candy. Police come around. That's when I saw the true face of fear.
Get on your knees. Hands!
They beat him, tortured him, killed him, right there on the spot.
Which we talked about in our podcast last year for Halloween 2021. But that was just such a really good sequel, kind of like a follow-up to the 90s one. But *CANDYMAN* didn't feel like it was pandering at all. It felt like it was really complimentary to the 90s story, where it follows up and it kind of just furthers the folklore behind who Candyman is, the influence on the community around him, why it's relevant that he keeps showing up in different iterations and forms. So I really, really loved Candyman. I just thought *Malignant* was so crazy that I couldn't resist having it be my number 1, because it stuck with me. It came out really early last year, and it's the one movie that I keep thinking of that I'm like, I really had a really good time watching that. So those are my picks. What about you, sir? I'm curious to know. I don't think we're probably in the same boat.
Yeah, well, I mean, the nice thing is that with you doing the first bit, you're going to give a really good description of my first one.
Okay.
So my first one, my vote is *CANDYMAN*.
Yeah.
I love the classic, kind of almost universal horror monster tone of *CANDYMAN*, and how it's like this almost like mythology. And for Black African-American culture, it's almost like a very like distinguished horror villain. And I love it. I actually, when we saw it, I thought it was going to be that Candyman, Tony Todd, was going to be turning into this guy. It's almost as a way to pass that torch, which wasn't really what happened. But I loved it. I loved the cutaways using like stick figures and like silhouettes. It's very much like Dracula, the Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, where they show the like there's little puppets that they show for flashbacks for the war and everything. And some people probably thought that came across as cheap, maybe. That this movie didn't get a lot of great reviews. People didn't really seem to like it, but I found it really great. I love art culture, and there's another movie called what was it, Velvet Chainsaw, or Green Velvet Chainsaw.
Oh no, that stylish Netflix one.
It's a Jake Gyllenhaal film.
Yeah.
And that one is almost kind of like plays into the pretentiousness of art and like the intellectual community, which we both are in a lot of ways. And so it was fun to poke fun at that. But this movie kind of satirizes those types of people as well. So I loved it. My runner-up, though, is The Night House.
You were right. There is nothing. Nothing is after you. You're safe now. You said you were safe? Safe from what?
And that's for similar reasons that Madame Defer picked *Malignant*. Is I thought it was a kind of a schlocky premise that was kind of gussied up to make, a bit more of like a, more cinematic, more mainstream feature. So, I mean, it was like a schlocky premise means it was kind of a silly premise about someone, the metaphor is about grief and how you deal with grief and suicide, really dark subjects. But the idea of what the monster or the creature is, I thought was kind of a schlocky premise, but it didn't come across too schlocky. And there's this kind of overarching sadness. It's kind of like *Malignant* kind of played into the, if James Wan intended to or not, it almost feels like it plays into the over-the-topness of a woman, demon, man face coming out of your skull, like cancer.
Spoiler.
If you haven't seen it by now,
Go watch it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that doesn't give much away because it was still really enjoyable. *Malignant* was really enjoyable to watch, but I thought *The Night House* took itself a little bit more serious, and I really enjoyed the twists and turns, and I really just, out of all the films that we watched, I think I enjoyed the experience of watching that the most. I wasn't incredibly uncomfortable, but I was really engaged, and I thought that the cinematography was great, and the drony music was good. It is on the list for best score.
Yeah.
So I did think that was, something that I just really appreciated pretty much all facets of that film.
Yeah.
So that's my vote. I have *Candyman*. I have *The Night House*.
Good picks.
And for you have *Malignant* and *Candyman*.
Yeah.
So I think the Rabotat pick for that is definitely *Candyman*.
Yeah, *Candyman* definitely was the winner.
Check it out.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, indie girl.
We got Best Limited Release Movie as our next category. This is going to be fun because, to be honest with you, I didn't particularly love any of these ones, but they also had some wild freaking stories in here. Some really good creature effects we'll talk about with one movie, which I'm sure is on your list. It's on mine. I'd be so surprised if it isn't. But okay. I think because I got to start off last category, you should probably give your recommendation for go into the best limited release, which would be the opposite of a wide release. It means that it was released in a more limited fashion. I'm sure some of these were even just maybe streaming releases, considering that movies weren't really hitting the theaters still last year. So, yeah, take it away, sir. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my top pick is Psycho Goreman.
Yeah.
PG Psycho Goreman.
Many moons ago, a nameless evil was imprisoned in a place far beyond reach.
Hurry up!
If he were ever to be released, it would spell certain doom for all existence.
Is that fear I smell? Your planet will be torn to pieces, and I will
Mimi,
face your
look!
screams as I rip.
Is this yours? Speak?
Oh my god.
Before I knew that Red Letter Media's Rich Evans was a part of it, which was really shocking, he plays a really small voice role in it, if you know who Rich Evans is.
Yeah. If you're good people, go watch Red Letter Media and check out Rich.
It's a very 90s, late 80s story plot, almost kind of like an E.T. type story line that's just kind of absurd about this psycho alien murdering killer who comes under the control of a sociopathic little girl and her brother.
It sounds crazy though.
It's super crazy.
But it's so good.
I really enjoyed it. I loved the music. I loved how self-aware it was. I enjoyed the effort put into the creature effects, and the of course hearing Rich Evans was hilarious.
Yeah.
And so I loved that. And then my runner-up is Come True.
You'll be okay to attend for the full 2-month period?
Yes. So we really just show up and sleep.
We just need you lying there in REM.
REM.
The stage of sleep where we dream the most vividly.
How many of us are in the study?
I can't tell you that.
What are you studying?
I can't tell you that either.
Are we ready?
Cool.
I don't have too much to say about it. I just thought it was really good. I enjoyed the music a lot. Thought the music score really, it was a really enjoyable film. It wasn't too long. It's like maybe an hour to hour and 45 minutes.
I think it's like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
about.
so again, like my criteria for what makes a great horror film isn't necessarily this, but I am much more favorable to almost any film that's closer to an hour and a half. Unless you really have something that you're trying to say that you really find engaging, that you think is going to play really well, I don't really need 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or like this upcoming Batman movie that's like almost 3 hours. I'm excited to see that new Batman movie, by the way. Nothing against Batman or anything. Same. Yeah, we're big Batman people in this house, but it's just, it's long and it's a little self-indulgent, you know. I think Malcolm X is like 3 hours long, and that's a movie about Malcolm X. So.
But I think you make a good point that the content has to fit the length, and there are some movies on here that are an hour and a half that feel like they're 3 hours long because they just take too long, where I think you make a good point that Come True, even to the extent that it cuts quickly, it still moves pretty rapidly, even though there is some like kind of fluffier stuff with her dreams and that kind of stuff. But it does move, and that's really nice, and it is a quick movie.
Yeah, definitely. So that's my 2 picks for those. What about you?
Oh my God, it's funny that you picked what you did, because actually I did the same, but I flipped. So Come True was my first pick for this, only because, like you touched upon, the music is super good. I was like really in the story most of the time. The visuals are really cool. I was kind of getting like weird Slender Man vibes at the beginning of the film, where it was like kind of playing on like these dark, ominous like creatures in this girl's dreams. She doesn't really know why she's having them, so she goes through sleep study to try to get some help to figure out what's going on, and they end up like tapping into some really cool, again, mind-bending stuff, not necessarily horror in the sense that it's not like grotesque, it's not like Malignant, or,
it's not really scary
No.
either. It's just a really good story about about like trying to understand your dreams, your mind. And the mind's really like maybe the scariest place of all. Like all ideas come from the mind.
And the power you have behind them.
Yeah.
I think that's really where this goes, is it's just like, it's so much more than just dreams ultimately. And it's like a young girl, she's vulnerable. There's all sorts of kind of themes going on there again with like the female lead.
And it's kind of like a sci-fi premise too, which is kind of cool. In some ways it kind of had some Nightmare on Elm Street kind of vibes to it, which was really neat. Yeah, definitely. And I think something I wanted to touch upon too is that given with the wide release and the limited release, and pretty much all films on this list, maybe save for a couple, is films look really good nowadays. That's the thing, is like with really cheap films, they, you used to be able to watch a film. Like when we started watching Hurt yesterday, we watched half an hour of
wrong movie.
Tubi. Nothing against Tubi, but when you click on Tubi on our Fire TV, it literally pulled up this movie Hurt, and we watched about half an hour of Hurt from 2003 or 9.
Oh my God, this cannot be it, because we don't
cheap.
Yeah, because we don't read a lot of the plots either. We like to kind of go in cold. We like to really not be swayed before we watch a lot of this stuff. So we straight up for half an hour, and then we were like, this can't be right.
This doesn't seem right. And it was like, just looks so cheap and dated.
Yeah.
And a lot of these films, regardless, some of them are like pandemic movies that are filmed on a very limited budget.
From best limited release, I'd say Hurt would be like the perfect example of that, where it came it came to be about 2018, I think, is when they finished filming it and putting it together, but then it didn't come out till 2021. So it's on this
I'd also
list.
say In the Earth. In the Earth is a film that you can definitely tell is a pandemic movie. There isn't a lot of people or everything spaced out, and it's outside, and so those types of films. But even given those types of constraints, the cinematography, you can color grade now in technology, and so you can kind of get away with a lot like that. Yeah. But there's also use of anamorphic lens. The Handmaid's Tale super shallow focus, that's really a common trend right now. And I would say that those trends of using an anamorphic lens you get lens flares with those, you get buka. I'm not a film guy. I'm trying to sound like a film guy, but I'm definitely not. Like
you know some things.
But it's with the anamorphic lens, you get some really great distortion that when it's like in music, when you're recording the tape or something, you get this saturation and this distorted effect that just is wonderful.
And I think that's why they used them in a lot of these movies too, because like so many of the scores were synth based, and they got these kind of loud, drony, like booming things going on. A lot of these again are like psychological more so than they are like necessarily horror driven. So they're playing on how you feel when you're physically watching it and feeling it, but also that plays with the music and everything else going on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like with the cinematography and the sound design and the score, those three things alone can make a really great atmospheric film. Yeah. But then you also have, like, if you have good performances and a great story, then you got yourself like a masterpiece of a film. Yeah. And sometimes, that's like maybe my criteria. Like we talked a little while right before this podcast on what would be like the criteria of these films. And right now we're looking at the two big categories, the wide release and the limited release. And those are like the heavy hitters. I mean, the foreign films arguably are just as good as the American English-speaking films, but they're all using great cinematography, really interesting use of like crunchy, dry sound effects or just really gross, gooey sound effects that really like creep you out and make your skin crawl, to like great score. So if you have a really good score, even if it's a droney score and it fits that atmospheric mood that you're trying to go for, I mean, that's the move right there.
Story too. Yeah. And writing.
But if you look at =Malignant, it is a cinematic, beautifully shot film.
Oh, yeah. For what it is. It's amazing.
It's anamorphic lens, I believe. It is, it's got great sound design. Score is good. Yeah. So, it's there. It's got all those categories to make a great film, but the story is completely ridiculous. Yeah. And it's the same thing like with Psycho Goreman.
If we're going to Psycho Goreman, yeah, mine 2-pick. I mean, first off, all I have to say is the hunky guys thing. We'll cut to it. Here.
Look at all the hunky boys.
I do not care for hunky boys. Or do I?
It's too much, but other than that, yeah, it's a good story. It's not super expensive, I think, to make Psycho Goreman. I think probably most of the money, I would assume, probably went to their costume design and the creature effects type stuff. I don't know if it necessarily went to like big sets
you have to know
anything crazy.
Yeah, you have to know what your horror budget is going to be, because if you're doing a creature feature, something that has creature effects,
put your money in the creature. Yeah,
and you're going to be like, we're going to do practical effects. We're not going to do CGI. Yeah. We're going to do it like this. Then you kind of have to really put your money towards that. And so anamorphic lens are more expensive to shoot on. If you want to shoot on film, all hipster style, that's more expensive. If you want to have more than just a synth score, or like a band playing it, that costs more money.
For sure.
So there's a lot of things that go into
movie making.
Yeah, and also just like you're budgeting for it. And as a record label, we really understand what kind of goes into trying to be, you have a certain finite amount of funds, and where do you allocate that to try to make the most effective thing that you can make.
Yeah, agreed.
And so, yeah, I mean, the limited release, I think, does a better job of that than Malignant, but with the wide release, nothing against Malignant, with the wide release films, they have
money.
They have more money.
Last Night in Soho is a great example of something so big budget. Yeah. I mean, even the actresses that are behind it are all fairly well known. There's some well known names in that movie.
Yeah, there's money. There's sets. There's lots.
Big money. I mean, Quiet Place too. Also.
Yeah, there's money behind behind it. And so with limited release, it's a lot of times it's first-time filmmakers or, more amateur filmmakers who have a little bit more of a creative vision, and that's why indie movies are so great.
Yeah, but on that note, I mean, I don't know. It didn't feel like necessarily the strongest category this go around, but also for what is in it, I would say Come True and Psycho Goreman were two really fun, great movies for different reasons. So that was our picks. Check them out.
Hell yeah. All right, well, we got Best First Feature, which that means, kind of going back into what we were just talking about, the limited release is first feature are first-time filmmakers. People who decided to have a creative vision, that decided to write out a script, try to get this thing made. They felt a need to get this thing made.
Yeah.
And I think there are some films in here I didn't like as much, but some of the films here are some of my favorite films of the entire year.
Yeah, agreed. I thought this was a really strong category. And by the way, speaking of Best First Feature, Nicky Manos over here has a movie, his own short feature, coming out later this year. So you guys will want to check that out on Rabotat Rec.
As Ironfist and Nicky Manos, I love writing concept albums. That's like my go-to. I like being able to see the full extent of what an album can do. So up until this point, with Nicky Manos, it's been all singles and kind of disconnected. So that way we can kind of see what worked and what doesn't work, and also gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to work on branding for something outside of Iron Fist, because I've just made so much music as Iron Fist.
Yeah.
So
some inspiration from some of the stuff that you're watching, but also so many things that you've been influenced your whole life by.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what you're going to see with first features in general. So it's like, what's cool about this year is last year we were in the very beginning process of that Nicky Manos project, but now the project's basically done. And, now we're looking at the first feature, and I see it kind of under even a different lens than what I saw it last year. Now that I've actually gone through that process, I have a lot of respect for someone trying to get an entire film made.
Yeah.
Like we talked about it being 2 hours long, and I'm like, I don't really like the length of 2 hours, but I mean, for them, maybe they couldn't cut it down, or they felt like that story needed to be told in that type of length. And there's a whole bunch of subtraction that goes into making something that you might not necessarily be able to compromise with. And so, I much more respect someone's creative vision. So again, even if we say we didn't like something, check it out and see for yourself. Because these people put blood, sweat, and tears in all these categories, but especially for first feature, because this is the story that these filmmakers felt like they needed to tell.
Very true. And I would also say, I mean, this might not be a favorable opinion, but an emotional response regardless is a response. So that being said, regardless of your response, that says something about what this film or films would say and speak to you. So yeah, I'm
well, I want to know what sorry to interrupt, but I went last, so I want you to go next. So out of these 5 films, what's your first pick? What was your vote?
It was so good. I felt like this was my favorite category of all the things that we watched. I adored Saint Maud so much. That's my number 1 pick.
Dear God, your presence graces the air, and soon everyone will see.
Hi, you Maud?
Yes, hi. It takes nothing special to mop up after the dying.
You're prettier than the last one.
But to save a soul, that's quite something. Bless Amanda's body and bless her mind, which is shrouded in darkness.
Wow, really?
Saint Maud blew my mind. Actually, it kind of reminded me of my second pick, because we saw them, I would say maybe a month apart, maybe 2 months apart. But Saint Maud is a psychological mindfuck of a movie. It's a Christian movie. It kind of plays on the girl who is super religiously devout. It plays into her life and her work so heavily that she's almost, I don't want to say possessed, but I think that's probably the best way of putting it without giving away too much of what actually happens in the movie. It's not like straight up a demon possession film. I think it's really about a girl who's incredibly lost, trying to find herself, and ultimately trying to find peace with what she's doing and where she's going. And it's a whole story about a girl who she basically works as a home nurse for hospice type situations where people are dying. And she ends up having a bad incident with somebody that you don't see. It's kind of flashbacked, but you come to this new situation she's in with this old aging ballerina who is very, very sick and near death. But it's crazy.
It's not funny. I don't know why.
I don't know why you're laughing. There's somebody dancing. Just the idea of dancing for you. You got those sensitive ankles.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, it's crazy. This new person she's taking care of really changes her viewpoints and minds on things, and it does not go where you're expecting it to. And I think for that I really appreciated it, because you get a lot of the same tropes when you're talking about especially Catholic horror, religious horror.
Which is a genre.
It is a genre. And that was what I was...
15 films right now that are religious horror.
No kidding. And that's what I was kind of worried about when we put it on. I was like, oh, I don't know. But again, I think that first feature aspect, this movie did some things I've never seen before. And especially the last, I would say, 2 seconds of that film, slightly traumatized me for a good week after watching it. Just impactful. So I would say St. Maud is number 1.
And then 2 is just Censor.
This depiction is dangerous.
Come on, ain't it?
I'm cutting it.
Butchery, sadism, murder.
A wave of depraved and corrupt horror video.
Confusing fiction with reality.
Censor, baby. Censor, similar, where it was like really played on this idea of, it's about a woman who is a censor in the UK for video nasties.
Video nasties are really interesting too, as we've seen a couple with Joe Bob and a couple on our own. Highly recommend checking them out.
Going back to the Giallo conversation, a lot of those movies are technically video nasties.
It was just like things that are super gory or horror films would get censored and basically almost like banned from being seen. So it's just kind of interesting. We talk a lot about like cancel culture nowadays with people and companies and things, but that's always been going on. The focus on what is censored and the culture changes. But in general, I mean, you're always seeing some type of censorship, especially with films.
Yeah, definitely. And so that whole story is based on that. You're kind of going through this psychological mind trip with this girl who's also kind of being triggered by the work that she's supposed to be doing with the video nasties. She's supposed to be censoring these things, but as she's watching them, she is seeing her sister in some of these films, particularly as one actress. It just gets really weird. And again, the last, I would say maybe even like 3 minutes of this movie are incredibly jarring, but kind of like bring you to the point of where this movie is, which is that seeing is not always believing. And sometimes it's also really interesting when the person you're supposed to be rooting for, you can't trust them. And St. Maud has some of that too, but Censor for sure. I can't trust either of these leading ladies to believe that I know what's really going on in their heads.
Well, my vote for number 1 is Censor, and so I just wanted to piggyback off of you and say that I thought it was really interesting too with you can't trust the main character. It almost felt like something like a thriller, like a Hitchcock movie would do, where it's like the filmmaker is very aware that we're supposed to be trusting this character and the purpose of the character, and then they subvert that expectation by being like, no, actually, this person isn't this way the entire time. And so I don't want to give too much away, I guess, because the enjoyment of that film is the twists and turns. But the one thing that I really loved at the very end of it, which I know other movie reviews, like, again, Red Letter Media talked about, was the at the very end of the film, the aspect ratio shrinks from like a widescreen to a 4:3 or a 4:4, which is like the classic VHS film format. And so it happens very slowly over time. And what that's interesting, what that does is the blocking and the cinematography obviously gets truncated and claustrophobic. And I really loved that use of that in this kind of creative way, because there's another film that we could talk about, which I think is on this list. It's not. Never mind. But it is later. It is in another category. Is Hurt. We talked about it a little while ago.
Yeah.
Hurt does that too, where there's a lot of claustrophobic blocking and camera angles. Now the aspect ratio of the film doesn't change, but it still is a very claustrophobic movie at times. It's dealing with PTSD. And so it's a great use of that. So it's like if you're gonna, have these psychological elements that are disorienting or mistrusting, especially as things come to a head. I've never seen a film change aspect ratio gradually over time like that before. It was really interesting. I'd never seen a filmmaker be so self-aware with playing with the audience expectations at Censor. So that's why it's my top. I thought it was absolutely amazing. My second one is Saint Maud. So there's not much I have to really say about Saint Maud, besides that I really liked all the things that you said about it.
Yeah, they're similar, aren't they? Like,
I was just going to say,
yeah.
they're similar movies, and so it's like just different tones. One, I mean, you could say that there's like these conservative elements in both of them. They're both conservative protagonists, which end up becoming antagonists. But I found the story and the cinematography, again, like all those elements we talked about earlier, I found them a little bit stronger and a little bit more in my style for Censor. Whereas Saint Maud, I went in kind of expecting not to like it, which I try not to. Like we said, we try to go in cold, but it's just like, we saw the trailer for it, I think, and I was like, I don't really know, just gonna be like another, you know, Christian movie with the crazy woman as the thing.
Tropes.
And I saw these tropes and I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. That's probably going to be weird. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really great. I was really entertained. It's probably in my top 3 most entertaining watch movies that I really liked.
Yeah.
I also want to say something too, is like with award shows and award movies, things that are like claims that get nominated for things, like people always want to nominate things that they enjoyed the most, which makes sense, you know, like the thing that was the most enjoyable to you, that you really liked. That's wonderful, but sometimes there's films that like I didn't like as much that are better made films. Sometimes it's like there's bleed over. Like with Censor, I think it's a really well made film by a first time filmmaker, but it also is, all the elements are there to make it like a classic, and I enjoyed it personally. That's definitely one of the things that we, you know, look for in our own films, and we try to be unbiased, you know, as far as the filmmaking goes and our personal taste, to kind of separate it out a little bit while combining it, right?
I definitely would say so. No, I would think, because I think that's what makes us doing this, just going through these movies and watching them and trying to be critical, but also trying to be open-minded.
That's the challenge for us.
Yeah.
Because I think with most people, especially like the type of reactionary culture we live in now, is it's so easy just to react to something, and instead of watch something and then evaluate later.
Yeah.
So even when I was taking notes, I would write my first impression down, but what I noticed about taking notes like that was it kind of helped me be more unbiased. So that way I could kind of take my personal feeling out of it, then I could go back to being subjective. You know, it's like instead of thinking about it the entire time I'm watching the film, I could kind of write it down, forget about it, and then try to get back into that mindset of being unbiased.
Definitely.
But that being said, Censor and Saint Maud are great films.
Yeah.
Check them out.
I would agree. Check them out.
Oh yeah.
We're near the end. We've come to best score, which for us as a record label, again, is pretty important. And I think we both recognize that good music makes a huge difference in a movie.
Yeah, definitely. I think my vote that's on the list is Halloween Kills.
Oh, is number one?
Is number one.
Ooh.
And the reason why is because I think the motifs and themes that John Carpenter has laid out are so iconic, and I love having him coming back to reinterpret those. You can say what you want about the film itself. Madame Defer and I really didn't enjoy Halloween Kills at all. If you did, that's just fine. But we didn't really like it at all. I didn't really like what they were trying to do with Michael Myers, trying to do with the story. But the score is really, really well done. You can tell that John Carpenter and his sons are really enjoying making the music that goes into it. Horror films, I mean, they always usually have a synth score now, especially, but yeah, horror scores are synthesizer based. That's kind of how that goes.
They definitely lean that more towards that direction nowadays too.
I put on all these scores that were nominated, and honestly, Halloween Kills is the one that like I would listen to all the time. Like I would buy it on vinyl and I would just listen to it on my own, just as it is. So I thought that was really interesting. So it's like you don't necessarily think that would be the thing, but that would win, especially since it's like this classic filmmaker. But I mean, even if he wasn't a classic filmmaker, I really enjoyed the music. Mm-hmm. And my runner-up for that is the Electric Youth. Sorry, I don't have my glasses, trying to look sexy. So Electric Youth and Pilotpriest.
Yeah.
For Come True. I thought that was so great. I loved the score for that. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to give an honorable mention to a film that Madame Defer didn't really like, that I really liked, that we'll talk about later, is In the Earth. Mm. I loved the use of music in that. Again, In the Earth is a pandemic movie, quite obviously.
It's in the best limited release movie category. We didn't talk about it.
It is limited. Okay, cool. So yeah, that film is... It uses sound in a way to try to talk with the forest.
Nature.
Which is a hard thing to try to explain. It sounds really stupid, but I really loved the idea of using feedback loops to try to create sound through frequency and vibration to communicate with nature. I mean, if you find that interesting, you might like that. It's a very slow-paced movie, and the story doesn't make a whole bunch of sense, and there's a lot of problems with it. But one of the things I thought was really great was the music, and really creative.
Well, and they use the music as part of the storytelling. Like you're saying, it's like pivotal that she's talking to the forest with these synths. So it's not even just a background layer to what is actually going on. It's part of it. And that I think is like very submersive, at least. And that's what makes that compelling.
And again, it's like working on a budget. It's like your sound design for the post-production for the film is also the score, and the score is also so there's a lot of bleed over between that. I mean, there is sound design in the film as well, and there is score in the film as well, but there is this like just use of incorporating the two to, again, like cut down on the cost, I think, a little bit, and also just make it more immersive, a little bit more submersive. Loved it.
Yeah.
So those are my two picks.
Cool.
But yeah,
we did a whole hell of a lot of flopping around this year, because I actually picked Come True as my first, because I remember while watching Come True, the music stuck out for me. Like I think at like 5 different points probably while we were watching it, I was like, I really, really like the music. I really, really like the music. I got the sense, it was kind of giving me vibes almost like not as intense, but similar to the way music was used in It Follows. Very like synth heavy, which again a lot of these were, but it stuck out to me more as just being really, really compelling. And then I ended up picking Halloween Kills as my number 2 for a lot of the same reasons you did. It's kind of like that comfort blanket of like, okay, I know who I'm listening to, I know what I'm getting into. They're gonna obviously play a lot of those similar themes from the original Halloween, which for nostalgia purposes, like just makes you feel good. Makes you be like, all right, I'm back in. And then you watch the movie and you're like, oh my God, why? What did I do? What did I do to deserve this? Because if it was just for the music alone, again, there's a reason why that movie didn't end up in any other category other than best score.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it says a lot about it.
Yeah.
There are 2 films on there that I think that on all the films that Fangoria chose for their awards that didn't make it into the score that I think we wanted to talk about. I'll let you talk about the one that you know that you wanted to mention, because it's one of her favorite artists. My other one is the VIGIL. I like the post-punk sound.
Yeah.
That soundtrack that was in there. Definitely. I thought that was really cool. Like I really love like Belarusian post-punk.
We're going to talk about that movie more so too in a little bit, but yeah, I agree. I think that one...
so I like the music a lot.
Really fun. Also, really unique storytelling. Really, really fun. I'm going to just quickly mention The Power.
I love working nights. You can get up to all sorts.
Bit of dark won't hurt you. What is that smell? It's like it's burning. Are you scared of something? Who did that?
That made it into which category? The Power was for Best Streaming Premiere Movie, which we didn't do that category, but I did want to mention it.
I've seen everything on it. So.
Yeah, we've seen it. The thing that stuck out to me the most about The Power, though, was one of my favorite artists musically, and a big inspiration for Madame Defer, like outwardly, is Gazelle Twin. She is a UK-based, like, calling her an electronic experimentalist would be an understatement.
She's a performance artist.
Oh my God, and she's definitely got some training under her belt. Like, she is so beautiful, so dissonant, and just really does some wild shit with her music. And the minute I started hearing the soundtrack for this movie, I was like, oh, this is so like so Gazelle Twin, but it really plays into the grander story of also what's going on in that film, and it's very again, dissonant. I actually got recommended the music before we watched the movie on my Spotify. Yeah, my release radar. Every week I was getting new stuff. There's one song, The Power, that is really, really good. It's the theme song for The Power, obviously.
Again, that's a great movie that is super low budget, like takes place in one location, which I kind of complained about with Psycho Gorman a little bit at the end, but the entire film is a concept in like one location. But the cinematography, again, is incredible. It's super stylized. It's almost like Tenebrrism, which is a huge inspiration on me as well. Heavy shadow, heavy light. I'll show some examples of it here. But I also thought that, definitely Gazelle Twin's music was perfect for that type of film. I thought it was a good juxtaposition between, again, it's like kind of, there's a lot of really great British horror lately. Like Censor was British. Isn't it St. Maud British? The Power's British.
Last Night in Soho.
And In the Earth was British.
Yeah.
Yeah, Last Night in Soho is British. Yeah, it's crazy. There's a lot of UK horror films this year. And so Gazelle Twin's a UK artist as well. So I thought that was really great to hear her music in it.
Yeah, shout out too to Max D. Wardner. He wrote with Gazelle Twin on that. Check her out, Gazelle Twin.
Definitely
highly recommend. Any other music you want to talk about, or should we jump into Best Kill next?
I think we should jump into Best Kill.
Best Kill, man. This is like one of my favorite categories to talk about because we get so invested and involved watching the actual film, the way that it's made, the story, all these elements. But this is the category, like you mentioned earlier, where you really get to have fun with it. You get to give your own best kill to Fangoria when you submit your submission. It's just you write it in, you submit it, and you get to be part of a bigger discourse. This is fun.
This is fun, and I honestly don't have a specific one, so I kind of want to hear yours first. I have a film that I recommend for kills.
Oh, for kills? Oh, cool. Well, I like that. Mine is actually really interesting too because it's not specific to one kill. Where like last year, I remember I picked Freaky, the cryogenic freeze and break.
Yes.
That was crazy. That in and of itself. But this one is interesting because this is a whole scene, or actually it's technically two scenes, of kills that I loved in this one particular movie. We're going to go back to my pick for Best Wide Release, Malignant. It's almost has like these basket case kind of vibes to it where there's a girl, but she's got like a evil twin, like part of the back of her head is like her fused evil twin. And this evil twin just... for these scenes, just the minute you see that thing actually exposed and the minute you get into the police station with all these people who, one, are not prepared for what's about to happen to them, but two, horribly misjudge the person who's in front of them, this creature like breaks out and finally, and just massacres like all these people. Like there's literally nothing else to say except it's so freaking enjoyable, like just to watch. Like from criminals who are technically in lockup, they might not be criminals. I don't know. It's a lot of women. Yeah. It's a woman lockup, I think. And then going into the actual police station with the officers, it gets so campy. People are flying around. People are getting stabbed with weird parts of their bodies. It's just good fun.
So Malignant, the police station.
Yeah, I would say the lockup scene and the actual station scene. Both are so fun. They're just so ridiculous, and it moves around so quickly. It's just good fun. Nothing else to say.
Well, mine's in the category of foreign film. Mine's The Queen of Black Magic.
Kenapa sih kita nggak jadi ke Bali? Sekarang malah ke tempat yang di map saja nggak ada.
On. Ini Pak Pandi. Dia yang ngegedein kita di panti asuhan ini. Kalian udah lama di sini?
was some really weird shit in this
Yeah,
movie.
you could like almost pick like any of them in there and be like, wow, that's pretty crazy. But that film is a remake of a older folkloric film from like the 70s or 80s or something like that, which we haven't seen the original, but I really loved that film. It's more like a standard, but the Indonesian horror genre is just amazing. Like last year, I mean, pretty much any Indonesian horror film I've seen in the last few years have just been amazing. I love the writing, cinematography, graphic, gore stuff, the special effects specifically. All that stuff's great.
Great choice. I also love that movie. I think going into that movie, we should just pivot into our recommendations because I think that was a movie that we both have. We picked a Rabotat top 5, and then we're going to give a couple extra recommendations about things that we liked.
And again, check out below in the video if you're watching this on YouTube, or check it out on social media. We'll have a list of recommendations for you to check out.
Yeah, in the description wherever you listen to podcasts, we'll have all that there. So
yeah,
you guys
definitely.
can check it out.
And also just let us know if you've seen any of these. We kind of want to have a dialogue with some fellow horror fans just to kind of know what they thought about it, what our tastes, if we have any kind of crossover or not. Just kind of want to know.
Yeah, agreed.
So what are the 5?
Okay, the 5, jumping in, the Rabotat 5. All right, we got Candyman as the first one, obviously, because we both had nothing but wonderful things to say about it. It's the first big wide release. We also both put Night House, because I think ultimately, like Nick touched upon, it's a really, really kind of interesting mind bender of a female-led movie, but it has a lot of really great elements, cinematography, and it is beautiful. The story is really fun. Writing was really good. Nothing about that movie stuck out to me as unsavory. I friggin' loved it. Censor ended up being our third pick for all the reasons we talked about earlier. Again, just kind of a unique story with the video nasties, but also plays upon this girl and her mental state. I think that was really fun. Queen of Black Magic, which Nick just talked about. Queen of Black Magic was a wild ride. Every corner it turned, there was some new death or some weird, like the bus scene when they come across the bus. I won't give anything away. There's just a lot of things you're not necessarily expecting, but it takes it there. And it comes back to like injustice to women ultimately in that story as well, and to children to a certain extent. So there's that. And then our last big pick was Midnight Mass. We talked about that one in our Halloween 2021.
Oh, we did talk about Midnight Mass.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
Yeah, we did.
That film is that is great. Now that's not a film. That's a little bit more of a time commitment. A lot of people complained about the monologues in that, but I loved the style of it. It's got a ton of substance, a lot of really heady themes, philosophical themes, religious themes, social themes. Just a lot of, it's just a really well done piece of art, and it's my favorite thing that Mike Flanagan's ever done. And God bless Mike Flanagan, because Mike Flanagan is one of the best horror thriller filmmakers of like the last 20 years.
Yeah, it says a lot that this is
bar none.
I think this was also the only the only thing on this list of all these films that actually made me have the emotional response of crying, which I did not do with any other movie. It takes a lot to get me to cry.
But anyone who's seen it knows the scene where it's so heavy, so just beautiful and bitter and horrifying, and there's a lot of emotions in it. And if you're looking for like a really just wild ride, again, it's a religious film. It's a religious subject matter, but it's treated really well. It's treated respectfully. Everything is just so subtle, but also just like so highlighted and focused. It is an incredible piece of art. So
even the gore is beautiful.
And the gore is great too. It knows everything, character design, everything. Yeah. So we won't, keep just going on about it. We could dote on it forever. But so we have 2 more that we wanted to talk about each that are kind of like our own separate things. Like we made a list of 10 films, and then 5 of them kind of bled over, and we kind of combined those, and then we, have a couple other ones that I think we'd like to recommend. So
definitely.
Do you want to recommend first?
The 2 I really wanted to touch on, Jacob's Wife felt like such an injustice.
Madame Defer is wearing...
my Reanimator Jeffrey Combs, but also like a little bit of a nod to BC, Barbara Crampton.
Anne, I am surprised that you wound up marrying Jacob. Whatever happened to the adventurous Anne?
This is so tempting.
she made it as the best lead performance. And then also her male counterpart, I'm pretty positive.
Yes, he's in Sequoia.
Larry Fessenden. He also made it. So that was what was interesting is they both got nominated for best performances, but then the movie itself didn't get nominated for anything.
It's a really great film.
It's so fun.
It's about a woman finding her like attractiveness again.
Yeah, and age.
And as she gets older, she gets her groove back. It's
also,
like a vampire movie about a woman getting her groove back.
With more religious undertones, with more like her husband is
a priest.
I want to say he's a priest or a minister.
Yeah, something like that.
To whatever extent he's involved in that, and she has been like, she's kind of like this, very kind of uptight, proper wife.
She's living his life, not her life.
Yes, and so that was very cool. Also because Barbara Crampton's such a fantastic actress, and she just brings 110% to everything she's doing, whether it's a good film or a bad film. Iconic.
Okay, so what's your second recommendation?
My second recommendation, for more fun than anything, but Fear Street. I really like the series as a whole.
All three films.
Yeah, I know they have 1666 in Best Streaming Premiere Movie category, but probably the first one the least. 1994 was like the weirdest one for me.
You didn't like 1994?
Not as much. I think because you and me too it was very hard to get past a lot of the music choices that they made in the 2 episodes of Fear Street that are like based around an actual like time where there was like recorded music. Yeah, and pop culture. So 1994 is just full of like
90s music.
Yeah, and all the shit that you would hear like on the radio and stuff, which is great. I mean, it's all stuff that I like, but you can tell they're leaning into, again, like more nostalgia factor stuff with that. But even though it's loosely based on like R.L. Stine's Fear Street, I loved that series as a kid growing up. I used to read all those books, so I was really excited to see what they would do with like a Fear Street series. 1666 is definitely the height of it because they kind of do a similar thing like what they do in American Horror Story, where they have the same actors and actresses play different roles once we get to that 3rd installment of that series. So it's really cool. I love the witch angle. It's like kind of all those like, again, it's the classic horror tropes that you kind of love, but in a different presentation. And so I don't know, it's a little bit of a commitment. It will take you a little bit of time. I think it's like each one is maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and it is a 3-part series, but a lot of fun. And a lot of actors and actresses that you'll recognize, especially this generation. Very, very cool. Like Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter, who was in Stranger Things, is in the first episode. Stuff like that. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Recommend it. Fun time if you want to commit to some time. So... What about you?
My 2 is the first one's In the Earth, which you talked about a little earlier. Is Madame Defer didn't really like a lot of the editing choices and just the story in general, which is totally fine. I preferred. Anything you wanted to say?
No.
Did you want to cut in?
No, I was just I can't stop getting out of my head like the weird like moments of like cutting with like the synth playing and stuff. It reminds me of being back in Berlin, like watching like a performance arts piece where somebody is like, there's some very dramatic dramatizing in this film, but it also like I really like the story.
Yeah, definitely, and I loved like the feedback loop idea and all that stuff, and I don't know, for some reason I enjoyed it a lot. I could really tell that it was a pandemic movie, which you've brought up a few times, but I enjoyed that aspect of it. I felt like out of trying to make like a nickel out of 2 cents, it really was able to do that, and so that's pretty neat. I really enjoyed that. And then my other thing that I definitely would recommend that we haven't touched on at all is we talked about a TV show earlier, but Creep Show.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. I already know that your services are in great demand. You come very highly recommended.
Creep Show is awesome. We mentioned it last year, I think. It's great. It's like kind of like a horror hangout. Like after midnight mass, we'd watch a Creep Show. Like after we watched a really heavy episode of Midnight Mass, we would go over to Creep Show and just kind of enjoy. And sometimes they're uneven, sometimes the stories aren't as good, sometimes they're really good. But they're touching on all aspects of horror, and Barbara Crampton's in that newest season. She was great in that. Yeah, I really enjoy it. And it's like if you were a fan of horror or just like 80s nostalgia horror specifically, you'd really enjoy it. They're fun.
Yeah.
And they just feel like a home base. Which I think another thing we want to talk about is Joe Bob and Elvira.
Our love Love sucks, but you don't gotta suffer alone. Come down to Joe Bob's Heartbreak Trailer Park this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern on Shudder and suffer in style with me, Joe Bob Briggs, captain of the SS Not Doing Anything Saturday night, every Saturday night. I'll be hosting a double feature with some special guests that know a thing or two about breaking hearts, figuratively and literally. You name it, they broke it. Join us this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on Shudder.
Hello, darling. It's me, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and I'm coming to Shudder. Don't miss my 40th anniversary. Very scary, very special, on Saturday, September 25th at 8 p.m. I put the spesh in special, so be there or be square. But if you're square, you'll miss it.
It's Elvira's 40th anniversary. Very scary, very special, especially for you.
Yeah.
Two other home bases. They're in the category for nonfiction.
Yeah.
And we've never missed a Joe Bob. We've watched every single one when they've come out. And that's like a place for the community to get together.
Yeah.
But Elvira's anniversary this year was so fun. It was my first time actually watching an Elvira special. And I really loved it. My grandma actually loves Elvira. And so
iconic. And for her, like, she still looks so good and feels good. You can tell, like, she brought her A game, and it was so fun to see her and just doing her thing. It was fun, and to watch her movie from the 80s was a lot of fun. And
it was Madame the first time seeing that movie, which I've seen a few times because it used to play on Shudder. On the Shudder has 3 like live TV streaming cycles. So they have like a Slash X for slashers. They have It Came From Shudder, and they have a thriller channel. They also sometimes change it up with, like, during the holidays, a ghoul log, which is like a pumpkin, like still thing with a pumpkin lit and just, flickering with a candle.
Ghoul
log. Gulag. A ghoul log.
A ghoul log.
But yeah, I mean, Elvira's movie is really fun and really enjoyable and really self-aware. Like she's just such a self-aware, sweet and intelligent woman that just like knows what she's doing and also just makes like horror fun and accessible. Like my grandma is not a horror person at all.
I would disagree though.
We found out. Well, she doesn't watch any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And when she's watched Joe Bob with us, and she loved Bride or Reanimator. She loved Train to Busan and some other films, but she also likes Elvira's films and Elvira's whole thing. And so there's like a lot of crossover between those two people, and they're like the gateway, they're like the gatekeepers of horror at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah, we should also give a shout out to the Bouet brothers. We just didn't watch their show, but
You haven't really seen it too much, but we saw them on the last special.
We saw them on the last Joe Bob drive-in special, and that was really fun. Again, iconic in their own right. So it's that was cool because that was the achievement in nonfiction category, and I think even though we didn't end up doing it,
it's all Shudder too, by the way.
It's all Shudder. Go to Shudder again. Resounding Shudder endorsement, even though not sponsored, but Shudder if you want to. It's
I think that's the best way to cap this whole thing off.
Yeah, and I do. Before we even end this, can I just say one thing? Also, go watch The Vigil because we didn't talk about it much. We did touch about it really quick when we were talking about music, but that was also a really good film.
Let us know if you're checking any of these out, if you've seen any of these, like we've said.
Yeah.
I would love to know what you guys think about them.
Well, also, just to put this out there, and people have said this time and time again, but there's something for everyone in horror. So don't be exclusionary either. Like, check out the list. Really, like, watch some trailers of some of this stuff. See if you get a feel for it. But there's something for everyone. I think going back to your Nana, there's something for everybody, and horror is an incredibly inclusive community. It's a lot of fun. So definitely check out some of our...
We're weird, like we're part of the Drive-In Mutant squad. We've taken that oath, but we, like there's something out there for everyone, and we're just like lovers of film. Yeah. That's ultimately at the end of the day, we love art, we love film, we love music, we love lifestyle, we love all that stuff. Yeah. And check it out.
There's a fearlessness in horror that is really nice, so definitely check it out.
Well, thank you so much for checking this out, our first episode of the year. We have more coming, God willing. So.
I hope so. Good grief. Got more things to talk about, but this is always fun. Thanks, Ironfist, for taking the time. And honestly, this is always it's a pleasure.
Yeah. Take care.
Cheers, y'all.